So Donald Trump's tariff chief has called Britain a servant to communist China. The US president's economic advisor, Peter Navarro, is reportedly warning that the UK risks having its blood sucked dry by Beijing, according to The Telegraph. He said the government must resist string-laden gifts from China and avoid becoming a dumping ground for goods no longer heading to the US. Well, joining me now is author of the Durian Pact and political advisor, Christopher Howarth. Christopher Howarth, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It is your first time on GB News.
It is.
Now, Christopher, you wrote the book The Durian Pact, which is kind of a similar scenario, really. So talk to me about what is meant by this piece and this article about Britain as a servant to communist China. That links with your book.
Well, when China joined the WTO in 2001 under George W. Bush, there was this great hope that China would live up to its obligations as a sort of rules-based market economy that we could trade with, as we do with democracies and other advanced countries. And the hope was it would progress. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and maybe we're slightly naive that China is an authoritarian country that plays by the rules when it wants to and doesn't when it doesn't. And they are now the first or second largest economy in the world. They have a huge amount of funds. They have huge interests around the world, in the Far East, Africa, and of course in Europe. And we are a global country, and maybe we are slightly naive that Chinese economic interests, they don't necessarily coincide with our political interests. And as an open, democratic country, we have to be very wary of a large economy that is not a democratic country, but yet has an awful lot of funds.
How have we become so stupid? Because to me, it's quite obvious. You get rid of all your industries, so your steel, your coal and everything else like that. You follow some pipe dream that is net zero. You offset your carbon so you can say to the rest of the world, look at me, I'm zero carbon, look at me. Now, what you are is pretty stupid and zero brains, because now we are beholden to China. Even if we say we don't want our oil and gas from Russia and all these places, we still need solar panels and all the other things that make wind turbines and everything else from China.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we've lived for a few decades in a sort of fairly benign, peaceful world where we've got used to, we've got a very small defence sector. Yet, if we needed to build ships, our steel industry happens to be owned by China. Our energy, which powers our manufacturing centre, if we're going to rely on solar panels that are made in China by often by Uyghur labour, which is less than obviously the standards that we would like it at, we suddenly become more...
Well, Ed Miliband was prepared, quite happy to buy solar panels from there. I heard his interview on LBC with Nick Ferrari saying, oh, well, I guess that's how it will be. And eventually, because of some opposition, he then had to retract that and say that they agree now they'll never buy solar panels that have been made by slaves.
Well, exactly. I mean, the morality of a politician wanting to rely on slave labour to produce solar panels, yet lecturing everybody on sort of slavery that happened 200 years ago. I mean, sort of, you've got to put these things in perspective. This is happening now in China, but it's more than that. It's a strategic imperative of China to make us dependent on them. I mean, and they're doing it in plain sight. And we need to be less naive about this. We have interests in the world, and they may coincide, but often don't coincide with China's interests in the world. Taiwan, the Far East, Australia and New Zealand, huge interests of ours in that part of the world. We share a head of state. We can't sort of lose track of the sight that China has long-term ambitions, and it's not a democratic country.
Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogni, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogni continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step one, hit the link in the description. Create an Incogni account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step two, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf. Step three, sit back, relax, and watch Incogni work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogni. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan.
Well, even the blast furnace, the last 2 blast furnaces in this country, why would this Chinese company even care if it's open? They would deliberately run it to the ground, deliberately run it to nothing. They have blast furnaces in China that we would then be buying.
Well, I should think that was their plan. They would close it, they'd keep the customer list, and then we'd become dependent on them for the steel.
But even the politicians were loath to initially blame or say that could have been their master plan all along. There was this naivety that perhaps they were, no, that's not how it could have been. And eventually, then the opposition said, hold on a minute.
Well, of course, our own politicians are tied up in their own sort of problems with net zero, which was the thing that made them unviable to start with, that you make your own industries unviable, then have to subsidise them, and then are looking around the world, and the Chinese stepped in and said, we'll buy it from you. So we sort of stepped into that one by sort of having 2 conflicting policies, and China saw an opportunity to sort of hollow out our industry.
Oh, very, very intelligent of them. Obviously, they thought, well, they're getting rid of their coal and gas. Ha, 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 ha. We'll do it.
Yes, while they're adding ginormous amounts of electricity generation based on coal every moment, while we're happily closing our energy production and indeed our steel production. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, in a benign environment, if this was going to go on for decades, maybe we could survive without some of the heavy industry. But we're moving into a more difficult and uncertain period. We might need steel. Well, we always need steel, but we might need steel in a hurry to build ships, for instance. We don't have very much shipbuilding. But if we didn't have steel and we're having to import it from China, they might have issues if we're building ships ostensibly to rival them.
Exactly. Who in their right mind would pursue this absolute nonsense? I was going to say something show, and then I realised I was on TV. No, but you know what I mean? Who in their right mind would pursue such a foolish policy? Even if, you're saying you're going to get rid of carbon and stuff like that, who in their right mind would be beholden to someone like China? Well,
I'd like to think it's more naive on the part of our politicians rather than something more suspicious, although, of course, my novel was based on the premise that there was something more nefarious going on. But if you look around the world, China has intelligence interests in Australia. Quite a lot of this has been uncovered. They've been assessed as a security risk in New Zealand. Canada, there's been issues. It would be amazing if they were not trying to gain influence in the UK via sort of open means or less open means, sort of promising contracts, getting people sort of lined up with China, promising them jobs, money. We're an open society. It's very easy to influence our politics. I mean, if you have a lot of money and determination, which the Chinese do, it would be very easy to influence our politics. And it'd be very odd to think that they weren't trying to do this, because they've done it pretty much in every other country.
Well, anyway, any country would do that to another anyway. And you saw how with COVID, when suddenly people wanted vaccines, they were able to suddenly stop the ones that you bought. That's what they did to us, didn't they? And had it not been for Brexit, we wouldn't have been able to procure the vaccines in the way that we had. But it does go to show how weak we are, even with the war in Ukraine, and how difficult it's been for us because we're all intertwined globally, which is a problem. So talk to me more about what your book explores, because it is this and more.
Well, I've been in politics in the House of Commons for about sort of 14, 15 years, and it was based a lot on the experience of that and during Brexit, how a very fraught situation in Parliament can be used by outside powers, and in this case, obviously China. So you have China and Taiwan, and how you can use your influence in a novel to influence British politics, and came very close to success. But I think it's entirely believable. I mean, at the moment we have a carrier task group going to the Far East. We have Australia and New Zealand, long friends of ours there. We have rival with China economically and politically. So I tied this all together into a novel and sort of trying to shed some light on some of the issues that we're faced with.
Well, it's fascinating and it makes great reading. It's called the Durian Pact. Why is it called the Durian Pact?
The Durian Pact is the name of something that's little known, but we have a defence agreement with Singapore, Malaysia, Australia and New Zealand. It's the five powers defence arrangements, which in Australia it's called the Durian Pact because of the fruit growing in that part of the world. But the premise of my book was this defence agreement, which we are signed up to, comes into play because of China threatening the Far East. So not like Japan in the Second World War, but China. But some of the issues are very, very similar, and drew a British government into the Far East and China trying to stop them.
And finally, briefly, you are in Westminster regularly, daily. Do you feel that there is a sense of people actually stepping away from the notion of net zero because of the reliance on China and things, or are they going full steam ahead? Because we're getting a sense that they're going full steam ahead regardless.
Well, we're very far down the road of net zero. I mean, there are industries under pressure at the moment. There was one of the potteries went bust last week, citing net zero. We got steel, so we're quite far down the road. I think there is some scope to mitigate it, I think, in the Conservative, and particularly with reform, trying to reconnect with the industrial north of the England heavy end. I think there will be some change on it, but it's very last minute. And if you lose a company, it's pretty much gone forever.
Well, it's a bit like the blast furnaces. Thank you very much, Christopher Howarth. Really good to talk to you. Really interesting. OK, so his book is The Durian. Is that how you say it, Durian?
The Durian Pact. The
Durian Pact, and it is all about the influence of China and the influence of politics in general. Christopher Howarth, thank you so much.
Thank you.